excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas. My name is Priyanka Sharma. Here's our show for tonight.
See what happened to the people. Have mercy on us. Everything that is happening is a shame. Look at how people died. They are all civilians. They don't have any weapons.
I have also agreed with our brothers in Jordan and Egypt to cancel the scheduled summit in Amman today with President Biden.
The people of Israel, the people of the world, to know where the United States stands.
Who bombed the hospital in Gaza? Who is behind the killing of 500 innocent people? What can possibly justify blowing a hospital to smithereens? It has been a terrifying, devastating 24 hours. The bombing of the Al Ahli Arab Hospital in Gaza has led to global outrage, and rightfully so. It has been called a violation of international humanitarian law, yet we don't know whom to be angry at. There is no accountability yet because there is no clear answer. We have a blame game between the two parties waging this war. We also have a so-called superpower saying it knows what happened. Yet, we don't know whom to hold accountable for the killing of 500 innocent people. On Gravitas, we will present you facts, and only facts, not conjecture, not speculation, not hyperbole. Because in this fog of war, you may think it's easy to pick a side. But first, you must educate yourself with facts before you say that you stand with any particular side. Stay with me as we bring you the latest. Things have changed drastically on ground in Israel. The war has entered a more deadly phase. Its tentacles are spreading to other countries. 6 airports across France have been evacuated. Reports say the French police received a threatening email. Spain's Valencia airport is on high alert. There are protests across West Asia. Today, the chance of a multi-front war is more real than ever. Here's what fueled it. The bombing of a Gaza hospital. Let's take you straight to the focal point of this war. This is what remains of Gaza's Al Ahli hospital. Take a look. Its entrance is littered. There is dust and only dust. Let me remind you, this was a hospital tending to patients during wartime. You can see stretchers, blankets, chairs scattered around. The hospital was bombed on Tuesday evening.
Around 6:30 p.m. a shell struck the hospital. We don't know what it was, but we saw its devastating impact, with children being torn to pieces.
Such was the intensity of the blast that parts of the hospital building collapsed, trapping people under the rubble. Vehicles and ambulances parked nearby were left charred, and the windows of the neighboring building completely shattered. A doctor working in the hospital shared his account, his terrifying account of the tragedy. Fadil Naim, the head of the orthopedic surgery department, had just finished a procedure. He says he heard a loud explosion. People came running to his department, screaming for help. Naim says the hospital was flooded with dismembered bodies and wounded people. He saved whomever he could. The health ministry run by Hamas in Gaza said at least 500 people died in this blast. 500. That's the highest death toll from a single incident in this war. British Palestinian doctor Ghassan Abu Sita was in the operating room last evening. He says he heard the sound of a missile. Before he knew it, the ceiling of the operation theatre collapsed on him and other physicians. When he went out in the courtyard, he found bodies and limbs scattered everywhere. Abu Sita treated a man whose legs were blown off. Those who survived the blast have only horror stories to share.
We were just sitting here and suddenly there was an explosion. The glass shattered on us. Many people were martyred.
We came here because our neighborhood was being bombed. My son was injured in his hip and has 70 stitches in his forehead. I don't know what to do. It happened around 8 p.m. I don't know, a missile fell on us. We were all on the floor. Everything got destroyed. We were destroyed, but we thank God anyway.
The Al Ali Hospital is more than 140 years old. It was founded in 1882 and run by the Anglican Church. The hospital was located in the Zaytoun neighborhood. This is in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Locals say the hospital welcomed people of all faiths. It even had a church and a mosque inside for patients and families to pray. Fate had a different plan for patients who came into the hospital on Tuesday night.
My home is close to the hospital. I handed the boy to my wife and told her to get him treated. I went to the hospital. I saw young children whose legs were amputated. I felt sorry for them. I told them the ambulance is coming. I was carrying the dead bodies and moving them next to the wall outside. It happened suddenly. People were sitting. They were making coffee and tea. People were talking to each other. It was a safe location, a hospital.
It did not take too long for the news of the blast to spread. Soon protests broke out. First in West Bank, then in neighboring Arab countries. We will take you to the protest sites in a few minutes from now. First, let's show you a photo that the Israeli armed forces have released. This is the before and after footage of the hospital bombing. Israel claims that the Palestinian group, PIJ, or the Palestine Islamic Jihad, is responsible for the bombing. Israel says the hospital blast was the result of a failed rocket launch by the PIJ.
I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the Al-Hali al-Ma'adi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit. Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza.
Hamas is pointing the finger squarely at Israel. Listen in.
We hold the American administration and the Western countries that support the Zionist entity are responsible in full for the horrific massacres and the genocide that is committed by the occupation against our people in Gaza, the last of which was the massacre at the civil hospital.
Let me be clear, we are not here to tell you which side you should be believing and which you should not. Our job as journalists is to bring you the facts from the ground, and the truth is that facts are yet to be ascertained. And chances are we may never know what happened. But here's what we can tell you for sure as of now. The Gaza hospital bombing is what has fueled the fire. In the last 24 hours, buildings have been flattened in Gaza. A UN-run school has been bombed. What a great time for a global leader to land and try and save the day, right? Yes. What a time for Joe Biden to arrive in Israel. It honestly could not be worse. All eyes were on Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport this afternoon, where the US President's Air Force One landed. As we saw Biden hug the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, then the Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Joe Biden also met the Israeli War Cabinet, and it didn't take too long for Biden to share his assessment on the Gaza hospital bombing. Listen in.
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
The other team, not you, says Biden, in a clear support for Israel, telling the world that no, it was not Israel which bombed the Gaza hospital. And how did Biden arrive at this conclusion? Israel claims to have shared evidence with the United States. It has also released an audio tape and a satellite image that we will play out for you in some time. But for now, let's focus on Biden's visit. It has become a diplomatic disaster. It was over before it even began. We told you yesterday, the fact that Biden is taking the risk of visiting a war zone implies that a big announcement is in store. Perhaps the opening of the gates of the Rafah border for aid, crucial life-saving aid. Yes, this news just came in. Israel will allow aid into Gaza via Egypt. This is what Israel is saying as of now. What about steps towards stopping this war? Did Biden call for calm or a ceasefire to get the warring sides to arrive at a resolution? Well, the hospital bombing had upended it all. If Biden's visit was meant to showcase to the world that the US has the situation under control and is in a position to end the war, the hospital bombing has proven otherwise. What's worse, Arab leaders have called off an emergency summit with Biden. The US president was supposed to meet Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and Jordan's King Abdullah in Amman. That summit is not happening anymore.
In the face of this tragedy that occurred tonight, and in order to protect our people, I've decided to cut short my visit and return to my homeland, to be among my people in this great ordeal. I've also agreed with our brothers in Jordan and Egypt to cancel the scheduled summit in Amman today with US President Biden.
This was not a snub, suggested the White House, citing a mourning period. But here's the thing. It's not hard to tell that the situation on ground has left little to no scope for diplomacy. What there is ample scope for bad optics. Biden walked into this one with his other team's statement. It will be interesting to see how that statement travels in the Arab world. All the more given there is no scope for a balancing act during this trip. As all that remains in Biden's calendar now are meetings with Israeli leaders and officials alone. Listen in now to what Biden said after a meeting with Netanyahu.
And I want you to know you're not alone. You are not alone. As I emphasized earlier, we will continue to have Israel's back as you work to defend your people. We'll continue to work with you and partners across the region to prevent more tragedy to innocent civilians. 75 years ago, your founders declared that this nation would be one based, quote, based on freedom, justice, and peace. Based on freedom, justice, and peace. The United States stands with you in defense of that freedom, in pursuit of that justice, and in support of that peace. Today, tomorrow, and always, we promise you.
While the unequivocal support was very much on the expected lines, what one might have also expected following the hospital bombing is at least a word or two about international law. You know, in order to manage a complicated situation and keep the violence from spiraling. But Biden failed to deliver.
I come to Israel with a single message. You're not alone. You are not alone. As long as the United States stands, and we will stand forever, while it may not feel that way today, Israel must again be a safe place for the Jewish people. And I promise you, today I'm also announcing $100 million in new U.S. funding for humanitarian assistance in both Gaza and the West Bank.
Now, for better analysis and understanding of the situation on ground, joining me now is our correspondent Siddhant Sibal from Tel Aviv and Susan Tehrani from New York. Susan, let's start with you. What do you make of President Biden's statements talking about the blast in Gaza? He told Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, "It appears as though it was done by the other team, not you."
Yeah, President Biden was also asked how he's confident that the Israelis were not behind the hospital strike in Gaza. And he said, quote unquote, "The data I was shown by my Defense Department." Of course, we've seen also images coming out from the IDF as well that's been circulating online that sort of points to the fact that the Israeli side seem to not have been the ones responsible for this. I want to also quote from the national security spokesman here in the United States. She tweeted that while we continue to collect information, our current assessment based on analysis of overheard imagery, intercepts, and open source information is that Israel is not responsible for the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. So they will be investigating further, but it seems that what President Biden was shown and shared with convinced him enough to come and make this public statement.
Right, Siddhant, coming to you, you're in Tel Aviv as of now. There is so much anger about the bombing of the Gaza hospital, protests across the Middle East. What is the mood in Tel Aviv right now?
Well, mood is one of cautiousness, one of worry, one of concern. I'm standing in central Tel Aviv, and this is a place which has come under rocket attacks several times. In fact, it's not very safe to be out, especially at this time. We have seen almost every evening at this time, we have seen rocket attacks. Today, it was silence all throughout the day, perhaps because of the visit of the U.S. president. But essentially, on the ground, when you see, talk to people, there are two set of people. One, of course, common Israelis, worried, concerned, hoping that the government takes strong action against Hamas. The second set of Israelis are people who have been directly impacted. We have seen almost daily protests by those Israelis whose family members are abducted. If you walk around this city, you will see a lot of yellow ribbons tied everywhere as a mark of support. And
right.
also
in fact, Siddhant, we can also see the
those
screens
people
behind you showing the flag of Israel.
Well, of course, that is something that is very visible on the ground here across the city and across in Israel. In fact, a lot of vehicles you will see will have two sets of posters. One, of course, is the Israeli flag, and another is the pictures of people who are missing in the country, who have been abducted by Hamas. So this is the mood like here on the ground in Israel.
Right, Susan, just talking a little more about Biden's visit, this was indeed a high-stakes trip for Joe Biden. Has he achieved what he set out to do?
Well, except for the part that publicly he was not able to meet with Arab leaders, and Arab leaders didn't meet with him, which now seems like a lost opportunity on their part because it was due to anger and backlash regarding that Gaza hospital attack, if indeed it is proven completely that Israel was not behind it, then this wasn't lost opportunity in that sense. However, we did hear just now a few minutes ago that Prime Minister Netanyahu's office said that they have agreed for humanitarian aid to Gaza from the Rafah border crossing, which is Egypt. President Biden said that, make no mistake, that he's working behind the scenes with leaders in the region to get hostages released. And then we also learned that President Biden, of course, we knew this beforehand, before he went, was that he wanted to learn about the war plans, this ground offensive that's expected on the part of Israel into Gaza. And first of all, what Israel would need further, how long it would take. And again, you know, this concern by the United States, whether or not it will spill over to other parts of the region. Whether or not he could have done all of this in the comfort of Camp David, that's, you know, a revolving question. But for the Israelis, it was important that the president went there to express his solidarity and support with Israel. And then also he met with the families of the hostages. Of course, that's very important.
Right. Siddhant, the same question from you. What's your assessment of Biden's statement? Strong support for Israel naturally, and also making a distinction between Hamas and the Palestinians, saying that Hamas does not represent the people of Palestine.
Well, there is a happy mood here in Israel, and if you speak to people here on the ground, they're happy that the US president has traveled to their country at a time when their country is facing a war. I saw posters welcoming the US president, and while there was no red carpet given that the country is going through a very bad period, the fact that the US president traveled here was something that has been welcomed by the people. I spoke to many of the victims of the attack whose family members have been abducted, and they welcomed the fact that the US president traveled and hoped that this will make sure that there will be an early release of the abductees, the people who have been abducted. But all in all, will this visit help in diffusing the ongoing crisis? The big question. And essentially, as I said, that so far there haven't been any rocket attacks on this city. There haven't been any sirens so far. But when the US president leaves, next 12 hours will be very crucial. Any attack or any kind of development is something that will define the next stage of this ongoing crisis. Will the crisis spread, or will there be a diffusion? The big focus for the Israeli government right now is the release of the people who are abducted by Hamas.
Siddhant, I also want to ask you about some news that's coming in now, that Saudi Arabia has called on all its nationals to leave the Lebanon embassy, and it has in fact advised its nationals in Lebanon to leave the country immediately.
Well, look, situation in the north is also escalating. We have seen reports of firings from the Israeli side and also from the Hezbollah side. In fact, what the Israeli government has done is to evacuate its citizens 2 kilometers from the Lebanon border and inside. So the north and the south both have been evacuated, and Israel is preparing for the worst, any eventuality. There has been large-scale mobilization. We have been in the south several times, and we have seen movement of tanks and artillery firing on a regular basis.
Right. Susan and Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us on Gravitas at this hour. The hospital bombing in Gaza has left Arab countries infuriated. Support is pouring in for Palestinians from across West Asia. Overnight protests broke out in at least a dozen Turkish cities. The people of Turkey marched with Palestinian flags and chanted slogans denouncing Israel. Many gathered outside the Israeli embassy in the capital. In the early morning hours today, thousands of Turks gathered in front of the Israeli consulate in Istanbul. They clashed with the police in angry demonstrations. Turkish security forces had to use pepper spray, smoke grenades and water cannons to disperse the crowd. In fact, the Turkish President Erdogan said that the hospital blast showed that Israeli attacks lack the most basic human value, seeing the situation. Israel's National Security Council has now issued a warning against travel to Turkey. It has also urged Israeli citizens that they should leave as soon as possible. Israeli airlines are now arranging flights from Istanbul for Israelis who want to leave. There were demonstrations in Yemen as well. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of the capital, Sana'a. In Lebanon, more than 100 protesters gathered near the US embassy carrying Palestinian flags. The Lebanese police sprayed water and tear gas on them.
We're here to let the Arab people wake up. Free Palestine. Okay, so it's time to wake up, please.
Meanwhile, the Iranian capital, Tehran, saw massive crowds take to the streets to protest against a hospital attack in Gaza. They marched from the Palestine Square to the French and British embassies, rallying till 3 a.m. Tehran time. Listen now to what some of the protesters had to say.
The Palestinian people did not commit a crime. They don't want anything. That is their home. They don't want to leave. I expect the rulers of my country, Iran, to support Palestine and the Palestinian people.
Speaking of the leaders, Iran's foreign ministry has condemned the hospital bombing of unarmed and defenseless people in Gaza. It has called for an oil embargo and other sanctions on Israel. Iran has also urged the members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to expel all Israeli ambassadors. This comes as the OIC members meet in Jeddah to discuss the escalating war. In Jordan, hundreds gathered outside the King Abdullah Mosque in Amman. They condemned Israel and firmly opposed US President Joe Biden's visit. Some even attempted to storm the Israeli embassy. The protesters scuffled with the police as they barricaded the route to the embassy.
During the foundation of Israel, when it occupied this area, they are breaching international humanitarian law. Geneva Agreement is obvious in this regard. Medical centers or hospitals should not be touched. But what is happening are crimes against humanity under the American government's cover.
Jordan has also called off President Biden's planned summit with Arab leaders. Jordan's King Abdullah spoke out, saying the bombing was a massacre and a war crime that one cannot be silent about. Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi said, and I quote, "This war and the aggression are pushing the region to the brink." He added that Jordan would only host the summit when all participants agreed on its purpose, which would be to stop the war. Criticism has poured in from several Arabic leaders. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi issued a statement against Israel. He called the blast a clear violation of international law. Saudi Arabia too strongly condemned the explosion as a heinous crime. Meanwhile, Qatar's foreign ministry issued a statement declaring the expansion of Israeli attacks a dangerous escalation. You see, Arab countries have openly picked a side in this war, and they are now voicing support for the Palestinians. And for more on this, we are now being joined by Ahmed Ali Ibrahim. He is a political analyst and US-Saudi relations expert. He joins us from Kuwait. Welcome to Gravitas.
Nice to meet you, and I'm joining you today from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
Right. Thank you for correcting me on that. I want to start off by talking about the protests and anger that we are seeing about what's happened in Gaza, a hospital bombed, no accountability just yet. How do you gauge the mood across the Middle East right now?
Yeah, the Middle East is fuming. Listen, there is nothing new regarding the Palestinian file. I mean, whether Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th, and it's definitely a heinous attack, and it's not acceptable. This is what the Palestinian people go through day in and day out, whether it is in Gaza or in the West Bank. So this has been going more and more. Now, Hamas, which is a brutal militia, they decided to take the faith of many people, Palestinian people in Gaza, and Israel has retaliated not on Hamas. They actually retaliated on the whole Palestinian people, 2 million people. So it's like you are fighting ISIS in Iraq and you decided to carpet bomb the whole nation of Iraq. So it is not fair for the Palestinian people. It is starting fuming in the whole Islamic world and in the whole Arab state. And this could have been combated in another way, actually, that Israel can gain momentum, especially with normalization with the GCC country and other people, but they chose the military and killing innocent people. And this is what's going to create more hostile in the region. We tried in the past 2 years to actually zero the problems in the whole region. Saudi Arabia now is having a relationship with Iran. Everybody is having their good day. And all of a sudden we have this happening, and we have the United States pulling 2 aircraft carrier with 2,000 elite experts of the military with the newest weapon. It doesn't look like that it's going to stop at Gaza. It seems like a World War III is coming into place. This is just the start of the episode.
World War III is coming. I also want to talk to you about this latest update coming in. You're joining us from Riyadh. Saudi Arabia has also advised all its citizens to leave Lebanon immediately. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Saudi Arabia announced probably a year and a half ago that Lebanon is no-fly zone for the security reasons. And now they are really announcing this for the people, that if somebody went to Lebanon or there's a Saudi citizens in Lebanon, they need to depart immediately. I'm sure the government is anticipating that there will be some bombing in maybe south of Lebanon or in whole Lebanon. You know, if Hezbollah is shooting at Lebanon, I would take Hezbollah the next day. For me, I consider Hezbollah is a military militia, but that doesn't mean I carpet bomb 10,000 square kilometers of innocent Lebanese. So this announcement actually comes from the Saudis to protect their citizen. It's always been placed for the past year and a half, and they just announced it to reassure that any Saudi with a Saudi passports need to leave the soil of Lebanon.
Right, now, how do you view President Biden's statements that were made a little while from now? Aid for both Gaza and West Bank, strong support for Israel. He also says that the hospital blast was not carried out by Israel's military. How do you view all these statements?
God bless President Biden. I don't know where his mind is, but definitely he's taking this as a tool of the internal campaign of 2024. He wants to maximize it. He's trying to get the Jewish lobbyists in America on his side and everybody on his side to protect Israel. This is going to gain him some ground, so he's using it for his campaign. And basically, there is enough evidence that the IDF have beyond reasonable of doubt that they targeted this hospital and, brutally killed all those innocent people, men and women and children. But, as all the indication around the world, it says that Israel has done it. The Minister of Defense actually tweeted before he actually targeted the hospital, and he deleted the tweet. All the evidence are there, but definitely the unconditional support of the United States to Israel is putting putting the United States in a very bad situation among the Arab nation. The Arab people and the Muslim people are more fuming from the United States policy, and this is just only unfortunately going to give more leverage to the competitors of the United States in the region, like China and Russia, to take place. And to start make policies like what China did, brokering a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Definitely the trust on the Palestinian file is definitely not with the United States.
Would you call this a diplomatic failure on the US president's part?
I think it's a very huge diplomatic failure. This file has been with the United States for the longest time. It only increased tension in the region. It created terrorism. It created Hamas. It created Hezbollah. It created militia in Syria. It created terrorist militia in Iraq. This is what you're doing. It's a domino effect. If you are not going to have two-state solution and East Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine, this region is not going to rest. And you cannot actually push the Palestinian people to the sea or Sinai. If anybody wants, why don't any European country, which they are civilized and they have the greatest human rights in the world, take 2 million Palestinians on their lands? Why they want to push them to Egypt? Why they want to push them to Jordan? What is the status? So I think quit the hypocrisy and come clean and try to put things on the table. And unfortunately, if this is going to continue, there will be no rest for the Israeli innocent people in Israel and for the Palestinians. And, to be honest with you, the Palestinian people are very tough people to kill. No matter how much you kill them, they're going to be standing up. You will see this is not going to end. This is not a solution. Carpet bombing has never been a solution. They've been living like this for the past 70 years.
My final question for you, sir. If you talk about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Israel will allow aid into Gaza via Egypt. That's a statement coming in. This is what Israel is saying as of now. Do you think there are any conditions attached to this?
The condition is everything has to go through Egypt, and Egypt is willing, and they've been calling and they've been raising the flag to get all the humanitarian assistance through Rafah. However, there will be no one Palestinian coming out of this gate to Egypt. So the tensions needs to slow down. Everybody needs to hold his mood, and ceasefire has to start. As we're speaking now, the Israelis is bombing multiple cities in Gaza while President Biden's there. So they are in a very bad crisis. They exceeded any tragedy that you can think of. But all the Arab nations are backing Egypt in order to send these kind of aids to the Palestinian people. But you cannot have the Palestinian people actually pushed to Sinai. or to Egypt.
Right, Mr. Al Ibrahim, thank you so much for your insights, and thanks for joining us on Gravitas.
Sure, thank you.
As the war on battleground rages on, a war of words has also broken out. A war of trading blame. Palestine is pointing fingers at Israel. Israel is blaming Palestinian militants, while Arab countries have picked a clear side. It's not clear which side actually bombed the Al Ahli hospital. Both Israel and Palestine, however, have presented evidence. Which one is to be believed, we may never know. Let's first look at Israel's explanation. It has shared a video of the explosion. The clip shows the hospital and its surroundings before and after being hit by the rocket. Take a look. What is the point that Israel is trying to make? Look at the frame. It compares the bombed hospital with some other sites hit by Israeli rockets. By drawing this comparison, the Israeli military is trying to highlight the difference between the two. On the right side of the image, you can see craters formed by Israel's rockets. The military claims that their weapons, especially their rockets, are high impact and that they usually create craters at the site they hit. But on the left side, which shows the bombed hospital, the military says there are no visible craters or even significant damage to the building. So what's the conclusion? Israel says it wasn't their rocket, but in fact a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket, which misfired. For evidence, it has this video and some technical insights. On top of this, the Israeli Defense Forces have released an audio clip. Israel is claiming it is an intercepted phone call between two Hamas operatives. Before I play it out for you, I want to make it clear. WION couldn't independently verify this clip. It was released by the IDF. Listen in.
سبحان الله من عندنا ما لقاش غيرين بجرسلي. عاد هذول متلاقيين من المقدرة الورا دي بثلاث محط فيهم. ايش اصدر بتلاقيهم طالعين من المقبره اللي ورا المستشفى المعمداني دي اللي هو فسه ونزل عندهم. هو في مقبره وراه؟ المعمداني ولا عند الساحه بالضبط. هي وين لما تدخل على الساحه؟ اول ما تدخل على الساحه تدخلش على البلد، على ايدك اليمين في مستشفى المعمداني. عرفتها.
As you heard, the men claim that the shrapnel of the missile looked local and not from Israel. And what does Palestine have to say? The Palestinian Islamic Jihad has denied involvement. In a statement, the group called Israel's allegation a fabrication of lies. It also says the hospital had received public notice of evacuation over threats of bombing. Take a look at this report by the World Health Organization. It was put out 4 days ago. It says Israel repeatedly ordered the evacuation of 22 hospitals which were treating more than 2,000 patients in northern Gaza. Let me be clear again, we are not saying that it was Israel who bombed the hospital, but these are the facts that are available to us as of now. Joining us live now at this hour is Peter Kuznick from Washington, D.C. He's a professor of history and the director of Nuclear Studies Institute at the American University. Professor, welcome to WION.
Glad to be with you.
Let's talk about President Biden's statements. How do you view them? I mean, he clearly says that Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. He has also said that Israel was not behind the blast in Gaza.
Well, Biden has clearly and wholeheartedly and fulsomely thrown in his lot with the Israelis in this conflict. He's not been nuanced. He's been very direct, saying that Hamas represents pure evil and that Israel is an innocent victim and is justified in doing whatever it needs to do to retaliate. So Biden has also been calling for more aid for the Israeli government, as well as more humanitarian aid. And so the United States, there is little room, little space between the Israeli government and the American government at this point. However, as the horrors and atrocities continue to mount in Gaza, the American public, which backs Israel, is going to be much more disturbed by these images coming out. So this is the maximum of support that the U.S. is going to be able to give to Israel. And it's largely an emotional response to the horrific murder of 1,400 Israelis by Hamas.
Right.
Those of us who want to see a ceasefire and want to see other than a full-scale Israeli invasion are, for the most part, horrified by what Hamas has done and don't want to in any way justify that. However, an Israeli military response at this point is not the answer to the crisis there.
Right, now we saw what happened to a hospital in Gaza, at least 500 people dead. I want to read out the president's statement for you. He says, while you are filled by rage, don't be consumed by it. The choices are never clear or easy for the leadership. It requires clarity about objectives. A vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas. Hamas does not represent Palestinian people. But the question is, will any of this lead to a possible ceasefire? Given the language that is being used, the combative language that is being used when the U.S. throws its support behind Israel?
There is global support for a ceasefire, and that grows. And the more people see the images coming out of Gaza, the more the support for a ceasefire grows. However, there's a strong faction within Israel that sees this as its opportunity to destroy Hamas. And they're being backed by a lot of people in the United States in positions of authority. We have to look at the Biden administration foreign policy. It's been a very aggressive, very militaristic foreign policy all over the world, vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Hamas. And so this is consistent, the U.S. response so far. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes. There are many people who are speculating that Biden is counseling restraint. And that's one of the reasons why the United States that's why Israel has not yet invaded Gaza. I hope that that's true. But we've seen the public statements by Sullivan, by Biden, by Blinken to some extent, and they've all been very, very hawkish and very strongly defending Israel and Israel's actions. So we can only hope that there is something else going on. But we also see the position that the Arab governments in the Middle East are in.
Right.
The Arabs is inflamed, is angry and furious, and they're not following the nuances of the debate about whose rockets and bombs these were that destroyed the hospital. They're assuming that Israel was responsible.
Right. Now, you've mentioned the protests. We're seeing protests take over the Middle East. We've often questioned, will this war cross borders? Where all will it spread to? I want to ask you tonight, what will it take for this war to end?
Well, the question you're raising about crossing borders is the one that terrifies so many of us. If the slaughter of Gazans continues, then there's a very, very strong possibility that Hezbollah gets involved. And there's also the possibility that Syria gets involved and that other countries. Now, if that happens, is Iran going to get involved also? The Hezbollah is a serious fighting force. Hamas is not. Hezbollah is very closely aligned with Iran, much more closely aligned than Hamas is. So does Israel now confront a two-front or three-front war? And would the United States get involved? The United States has put 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in the area, supposedly to deter these other countries from getting involved. But that in itself will not happen. So then the likelihood is that that the United States gets involved. So we're going to see this powder keg of a situation explode beyond what any sane, rational person wants to see. So this is seeing a bad situation, but it could turn into a far, far, far worse situation with extraordinary ramifications in terms of human lives, humanitarian crises, economic impacts, and military impacts.
Right, Peter, thank you so much for all that analysis. Thanks for joining us on Gravitas.
Thank you.
If you've seen the headlines today, you would know a blame game is on. A massive blast ripped through a hospital in Gaza, a tragedy which has killed 500 people. We are all outraged. Everyone wants an answer. Who bombed the Gaza hospital? The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry says Israel was behind the bombing. Israel pins the blame squarely on a misfired rocket by Palestine's Islamic Jihad group. We don't know what or who was behind this heinous crime, but in the next few minutes, let me tell you why the Palestine Islamic Jihad group is making headlines again. Question number 1. What is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or PIJ? If you go back to the beginning, the PIJ is believed to be an ally of Hamas. The latter rules Gaza and opposes the very creation of Israel. The Islamic Jihad has been designated as a terrorist organization by the US State Department. The group's founders are Fatih Shakaki and Abd al-Aziz Oda. They were students in Egypt. They were members of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, which was a Sunni Islamist movement founded by Hassan al-Banna in 1928. Sometime in the late 1970s, the two founders felt that the Muslim Brotherhood was not fully devoted to the Palestinian cause. Reports say they were inspired by the Iranian Revolution, so they created the Palestinian Islamic Jihad with one motive: to support the Palestinian cause and destroy Israel. By 1981, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad was exiled to Gaza by Egypt's government. This was after President Anwar el-Sadat was assassinated. In Gaza, the PIJ acts as a decentralized organization. Reports say that its functions are different from other extremist groups in the region, like Hamas, Fatah, and Hezbollah. It has one goal: to attack Israel and establish a Palestinian state in the West Bank, Gaza, and other areas that they see as illegally occupied by Israel. So the Palestinian Islamic Jihad is an armed group. In fact, it is the second largest armed group in Gaza. It's also sharply critical of the Palestinian Authority and its policies. The PIJ also does not participate in politics. It limits its role to military confrontations with Israel. In fact, at times, the Islamic Jihad works independently of Hamas. Now, who are the members of this group? The current Secretary General is Ziad al-Nakhala. He was born in the Gaza Strip in 1953. Reports say many of the group's senior members have been killed by Israel. In fact, the group's founder, Fatih Shakaki, who was a physician, was assassinated in Malta in 1995. Back in May this year, the PIJ had announced that 3 of its commanders were killed in Israeli airstrikes. They had pledged to avenge their deaths back then. But let's talk about attacks carried out by the Islamic Jihad. In 1987, the group killed an Israeli military police commander in Gaza. In 1994, a car bomb attack killed 9 and injured 50 aboard a public bus. In 1995, a suicide bomb claimed by the group in Israel's Netanya killed 18 soldiers and 1 civilian. There are many more such incidents. Next question: who funds the Palestinian Islamic Jihad? It is believed that Iran supplies the Islamic Jihad with training, with expertise, with money. But most of the weapons are locally produced. And while its base is Gaza, this group also has influence in the West Bank town of Jenin and is believed to maintain close ties with Iranian officials from Lebanon and Syria. Another important question: is the Islamic Jihad group a big threat? Well, Israel says yes. The Israeli military has said in the past that the group was responsible for rocket attacks against Israelis in occupied West Bank. But as this war continues to claim many, many more innocent lives, it begs the question: are Hamas and Islamic Jihad the same? No. Reports say that Islamic Jihad is the smaller of the two Palestinian groups currently operating in Gaza. The PIJ is outnumbered by Hamas, but it has its own weaponry. Unlike Hamas, the Islamic Jihad does not intend to fight for political office or open any kind of diplomatic channels with Israel. The relationship between the two may have been tense, as Hamas has told the Islamic Jihad to stop attacks on Israel in the past. But more often than not, both the groups are united against Israel. Now, before I wrap the show tonight, I have to say, we have more questions than answers. Who bombed the hospital in Gaza? The US says it was not Israel. It was the other team. But in this fog of war, there is no accountability, not yet. 500 people died in one blast. A hospital which was catering to patients during wartime was blown to smithereens. Who will answer for the pain? Who will answer for the tremendous loss of life? Who will tell us why a hospital was targeted? Who will answer for the dismembered bodies? Who will be held accountable for the 500 lives claimed? Will anything justify the scenes of horror, destruction that we're seeing? Will any global leader call for calm, for a ceasefire? How many more deaths on both sides will it take for this war to end? As protests flare up across the Middle East and North Africa, can we even hope at this point that this war will end anytime soon? For now, these are uneasy questions with terrifying answers. And that's Gravitas for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
Hostilities have broken out between Israel and Palestine, and the tensions that had been gathering steam over the course of the last several weeks and months.
The siren has gone off. I don't know if you can hear in the background what's going on. I'm going into the shelter now. So it's a very, very serious situation here across Israel. It's a state of emergency.
The United States stands with Israel.
Well, we are starting this broadcast with a developing story from West Asia, where Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Hamas has launched a war against the state of Israel.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
A new drug is making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. This medicine helps slow down a patient's cognitive decline.
We look beyond the text. We give you context.
Is China preparing for a war in the Himalayas? And tonight, we come to you with some proof.
Hypocrisy is stunning.
Do leaders mean what they say? Do they ever say what they mean? To find out how real news affects you, your decisions.
Just when Iran took one step in the right direction, its moral police is planning to drag it further back. And once again, the victim will be women.
Watch Gravitas.
Welcome and thanks for tuning in.
We don't impose our views.
Did India threaten to ban Twitter? Either that or Jack Dorsey is lying to you.
That is Gravitas. We let life breathe through our show. Gravitas, the informed show for an intelligent audience.
Hello, welcome to This World. Vladimir Amelyan joins us from Kiev, and he is currently on the front line fighting Russian troops.
We believe that the world should be ruled by democracies.